Hello, everybody. So this video is going to be another one on frequency tables. However, this time we're going to use a larger data set. I think I did one with 20 last time, and I'm not going to do it by hand. We're going to use a computer to do it. So let me open up and share with you some data. So this is real data. I grabbed it from, well, you can see it up here. There's the source. So I'm always going to try to source the data when I can, so that if you want to go back, it's always a good idea to go back and look at the original data, learn something about how it might have been gathered, things like that. But anyways, the data I got from here, this is COVID data from the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, but it's data from the whole world. So what we have here is data for 206 countries, I think. Excuse me, 206 countries. And this is for yesterday, April 13th, 2020. So what it's showing is for that day, how many new cases, how many new deaths, total number of cases and total deaths for each country. So in addition to building a frequency table, we're also going to get to have a little bit of an understanding of how to use, a little tutorial on how to use Google Sheets, which is the spreadsheet program that I'm going to be using to present a lot of the data. And then I'm going to be asking you guys to use eventually. So we'll have when I do assign stuff, I will give more detailed instructions, but this is just a general introduction to Google Sheets as well. So couple of things. First, notice I have, this is just the name of the file, so I will share this eventually. I'll give you a link for this. I like to name them something useful. So I've called this one frequency table, and then COVID data 2020-0413. There's a reasonable chance we'll use some COVID data again this quarter, so I want to keep it organized by date. We've got our menus up here. There's lots and lots of stuff going on. I'm not going to go through each one. Down here, this is the spreadsheet. And if you're absolutely new to spreadsheets, what you should understand is it's a way of organizing information. So what we're seeing are cells. These little individual blocks are cells. And in these cells, we can keep information. So for instance, these cells over here each have the name of a country. And then we've got numerical information in each cell over here, right? And you can just enter by typing. When you hit enter, it goes to the next cell, and so forth. I'll point something out. Whenever you click on a shell, it also shows up here what's written in the cell, which seems redundant because it's the exact same thing you're seeing on the screen, but we'll see in just a moment why that's sitting up there, because sometimes actually what's shown in the cell isn't the same as what you type, so you want to know what was actually typed. Okay, so here's our data. We see there's 206 entries, something like that, 207 entries. It's not very useful in this format, right? It's hard to look through this scrolling bit of data and understand much from it. So the first thing I'm going to try to do, the frequency table is going to help us organize the data, but I'm going to do a little organizing of this raw data first. So first, I'm just going to select, so notice I selected this upper left corner of my data. I'm skipping the header columns. And I'm going to select the lower right-hand corner. So I've got all of my data selected. Okay, oh, and I held down Shift when I hit that second one, so it selects everything. If I didn't hold down Shift, it would just select the new cell. So what I want to do is I'm going to organize this data. Right now it's alphabetical by country, which isn't really important to me. If I was just sort of wondering about what's happening across the world, I'm more interested in organizing it by the number of, say, cases or total deaths or something like that. So let's organize. I'm going to go up to data here and hit sort range. What I'm asking it to do is sort. So I'm going to sort it by something other than the alphabetical. And I'm telling it sort the stuff I have selected. That's what the range is telling it. So I'm going to hit sort range. And it's asking me, how do I want to sort it? What do I want to use to sort it? Right now, it's sorted by the names of the countries, which you might notice is column A, right? The columns are noted across the top here by letters. The rows are noted by numbers. So this is Afghanistan is in the cell A3. We say the column A and the row 3, right? Well, it's already sorted by column A. I want to do something different. I want to sort by, first let's sort by new cases, right? So this would be saying let's organize this data by how many numbers of new cases they had on April 13th this year. And then I can decide the direction. Do I want to start with the smallest and go to the largest, or the largest and the smallest? I'm going to go from smallest to largest. So let's see what happens when I hit this. Right. Notice now the number of new cases. We don't have Afghanistan first. We have 0. We have Angola, and in fact we have all of the countries with 0 new cases. Right, down to Zimbabwe. So these first 59 countries had 0 new cases on April 13th. Then we get into the ones with 1. Within the zeros, for instance, you can see it still alphabetized them, but it started by going by all the zeros and alphabetizing those. And on and on and on we go down, and we see the number of new cases increasing. Oops, I went too far. There we go. Right. Until we get down to the bottom. And I'm noticing now that I didn't even realize was in here, this is a good reason to organize it, that one of them isn't a country, it's a total. We have the world down here at the bottom. And so in the future, I'm gonna ignore this cell. I'll keep it, it's nice to have the totals, but I won't sort it. I wanna keep this at the bottom the whole time. Let's sort by something else. So again, I'm gonna click on this. Notice if I just click on another cell, it selects it, but if I hold down Shift, it selects everything between those two cells. So I'm going to start here, go back up to the top. Instead of new cases, let's do a frequency for total cases. So I'm going to organize this data by the smallest number of total cases to the largest number of total cases. So I'm going to data again, going to sort range. But now instead of organizing by column B, which is the new cases, I said I want to do total cases, which is column D. So let's organize there. We sort from smallest to largest again. Okay, and so now we have total cases. We can see everything's going up by that total number of cases, right? Notice it's not organized anymore by new cases, for instance. We go through zeros, then 1, and we've got 1 new case here, but then back down to 0, and then 2 new cases here, and then back down to 0, and then up to 2, and then 3, and then 0. So it's not organized in this column anymore. It's organized by this column, which is now strictly increasing, okay? So when we do this, it reorganizes everything we had selected so that we're keeping the right data with each country, okay? We're making sure that we keep the correct data with each country. I'm suddenly worried that maybe I didn't select the right thing before. So let me take a quick look at something. Indeed, I didn't actually select the country. So I just hit Command Z to undo that ordering because I realized I had actually not selected the right thing. It would have separated the data from the country. So let me do that correctly again. I selected the bottom right-hand corner, and I selected this top left corner, right? So let me explain the mistake I just made. By not selecting the country names, when it reorganized the columns I had selected, it would leave the country names alone, which means now the countries aren't matched up with their data. When I go and sort it now by column D, since I've now selected the correct thing, it's going to move, for instance, Angola is now not the smallest number of total cases. It'll move it down somewhere. Well, it will move Angola, the name, with it because it's part of the selection I've selected here. Okay, so now I'll do this the correct way. All right, so now we see we're organized by total cases. We see a different country in this first spot because now instead of, we had Angola up there before, which had 19 new cases, it's moved down. We now have Yemen because it's the smallest number of total cases as of April 13th. Okay, so now I've got my data organized from smallest to largest total cases. So we see we go from 1 up to almost 56,000, okay? I'll make a quick comment. This is, of course, confirmed cases. We're not going to assume or not assume that this data is correct or incorrect. This is the reported confirmed cases. So there's lots of arguments to be made for what this data actually means, right? We know there are different methods for testing and different countries testing to different levels. And so having a small number of confirmed cases could mean there hasn't been much of an outbreak, or it could mean that there hasn't been much testing to see if there's an outbreak, right? So this is only confirmed cases. Okay. So I have some decisions to make. Remember our frequency table from yesterday. We would take each data value and then see how many times did it show up, right? Well, our data values here are the total cases. So my first data value is 1, and it showed up once. My next data value is 2, and it showed up twice. My next data value is 3, and it showed up 3 times. 4 showed up twice. This would be a huge frequency table, right? We'd have data values from 1 all the way up to 55,700. Sorry, I said 56,000 for this. 557,571. Right? That's a huge amount of data values. So I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a grouped frequency table, right? Here's all these countries, for instance, that have a small number of new cases, right? I might just, what's the difference when I'm talking about upwards of 500,000 cases between having 388 and 389 and 397, right? I can consider those almost the same amount of cases, right? They're more or less the same. It's not much of a difference. So what I'm going to start doing is grouping data together. So we're going to decide how big of groupings do we want to make. So let me start putting some numbers into this so this makes a little more sense. I could say, for instance, 0 to 50,000, 50,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to 150,000, and so on. Okay, I'm not going to type them all through, right? But what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to count all the cases, all the times there's a country with a number of cases between 0 and 50,000, or 50,000 and 100,000, or 100,000 and 150,000, instead of counting individual numbers. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. And the way we're going to use the computer to do this, instead of typing out these ranges this way, I'm going to do the following. All I'm going to type is the upper end of the range. And also, now that there's a pattern established, I'm jumping up by 50,000 each time, the computer should recognize it. So I've selected these 3 and grabbed this little box here, and I'm just going to move it down. And notice it just keeps the pattern going. So I don't have to do all that typing. So it went up to 50,000, 100,000, 150, 200, and so forth. Okay. Now, in this column, what I want to have is I want to count how many cases are between 0 and 50,000, right? So I'm just writing the upper bounds, right? The top of that range for right here. And this is because this is the way Google wants it written, because I'm not going to count these by hand. I'm going to let the computer count it for me. And so here's what I'm going to do. In this cell, I'm going to type first an equal sign. Okay. When we type in equal sign into a cell, what we're telling Sheets is I'm about to give you a command. I'm going to tell you to do something, and what you're going to show me in this cell is not what's written, what I type in, but the result of my command. And the command I'm going to do right now is frequency. So notice I typed FRE and it gives me an option for frequency. It's trying to guess what I'm probably typing. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So now that I've clicked on frequency, it gives me a little hint as to how the frequency command works, okay? There's two things I have to give it. I have to tell it what data do I want to do the frequency for, and what are the classes. The classes are these ranges we were talking about, 0 to 50,000, 50,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to 150,000, and so on. So I have to tell it those two things separated by a comma. Okay? And I can actually use the mouse to tell it which data I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the first piece of data I want. This is in our cell D3. And then I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. And I'm not going to include the world, so I'm going to stop with this United States entry, and I'm holding down Shift, and then I'm going to click on this cell, right? And now it has selected all of them, and it's automatically showing up in that command. Then I'm going to hit comma. Now I have to tell it how should it split this data up to count, and that's what this column I is for. So I'm going to select I 3 up to 60,000, close the parentheses, and hit enter. And notice what has happened. Okay, automatically we're getting counts of frequencies. Right? So there are 196,000. So let's put in some labels here. This is the upper. Let's say it this way. This is the class upper bound. I'll just put UB since it's too long. And this is the frequency. Okay. So what we're counting is there are 196 data points between 0 and 50,000, 5 between 50,000 and 100,000, 1 that's between 100,000 and 150, and so on, okay? A couple of things. First of all, when we say from 0 to 50,000, one question we might ask is, what if a country has exactly 50,000? Google, the way that this frequency command works, will count the 50,000 in this category. So whatever number you put here will count those here and not in here. It'll start with anything after that number, okay? I also want to point out, notice this cell looks like it says 196. If I click on it, up here in this menu bar in the upper left, it tells me what command I actually typed. So that's why we have this extra space to show what is typed into our cells, because sometimes what's typed what's shown isn't what's actually typed. So what I typed here was the frequency, this frequency command, and what shows up is the number, okay? All right, so that's the beginning of our frequency table. So looking at this frequency table, I feel like I don't really like it, right? It hides too much. It doesn't really tell me much about what's going on in here, right? Between 0 to 50,000. So I want to change my classes. I think it's too big a spread at the bottom. It makes sense up here to have this big of a spread. So I'm going to change the spread. I'm going to go up first to 5,000. And watch what happens when I change this. The numbers automatically update, right? This frequency command is still looking at I3 to I14 for the classes and realizes I changed one, so it recounts based on my new information. And that still seems like a lot. Let's do this. Let's try 500 and see what that looks like. Let's try 100. even smaller. Let's go 50. All right, I'm going to do 50. So I'm going to go from 0 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 150, then up to 200, 250. Let's now start to jump a little more as the numbers get bigger. I'll go up to 500, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. Sorry, that's 100,000 I want. Let's go to 50,000. Let's try that. 50,000. And let's go 200,000, 500,000. Okay, let's do this. And just by the way, Google adds this one extra spot here to say if there's any data values above your highest class here, and we don't have any, right? I stopped it high enough to capture everything. So I'm just gonna, oh, I guess it won't let me erase that. Oops, okay. It wants that there, so I'm just gonna leave it. Okay, so this is not typical, although it's not super rare either, to have your frequency classes, to have your classes not all be the same size. But this data, it seems, doesn't make sense to have the same size classes. We have such widely different, right? Countries that have one total case versus countries that have 550,000 total cases. It's hard to look at them in the same way each time. And it doesn't change the meaning of frequency, right? It still tells me that there are 62 countries with between 0 and 50 cases, right? That's what these two cells are telling me. Or here that there's 14 between 50 and 100, right? And so on and so forth, okay? All right, let's do a couple of other things. Let's do the relative frequency, okay? And remember what the relative frequency is. We take the frequency divided by the total number of data. So I need to first compute the total number of data. Let's do that down here. And again, I don't want to add up these numbers on my own. I'm going to let the computer do it for me. So I'm putting my cursor in this cell. I'm typing equals because I'm going to put a formula in. And notice Google has almost perfectly guessed what I want to do. I want to do the sum, but I want to do the sum of all of these frequencies. And we see that we get a total of 205. Okay, so that's my total. So the relative frequency will be each data value divided by the total. So let's do this. Again, I'm going to do a command. I'm going to type equal. And instead of typing the number 62 in, because maybe I'm going to change my mind about these classes again and numbers are going to change, I'm going to tell it to read whatever numbers in here. All right, so I need to identify this cell, and I can identify it by J3, the column it's in and the row it's in. So I'm going to just type J3 divided by, so just the slash, and 205. Right. And now here's something nice. I'm going to copy, actually I think I can just grab this little square here. Let's see if this works, and move it down the row. And what has it done? It's done the same command in each cell, but notice up here, in the first one, it says J3. When I move down one cell, it changes it to J4, which is exactly what I want. I want J4 divided by the total. So now it's done all of that computation for me. Okay. And then finally, let's do one more column with the cumulative relative frequency. And this one's a little more complicated, but again, the computer's going to do a lot of it for me. So remember the cumulative relative frequency adds up the relative frequency for this, this class plus all the ones above it. This one doesn't have any above it, so the cumulative relative frequency here is just the number in the cell to its left. So it is going to equal K3. The next one is going to equal the cell next to it, so that's K4, plus the cell above it, L3. Right? Because I want to add this number here to this number here, but the number here is the same, and I'll show you why in a second, why I've used this one over here. I'm going to copy this and paste it, and let's see what's written in this cell. It says K5 plus L4. K5 is this cell right here. L4 is this one here. L4, remember, is already adding together all the ones before it. So when I add this and this together, I get actually all three of these added up. And if I do it again, I get the same. I'm just shifting down, getting the right formula all the way down. And so this is going to give me, oops, I stopped too soon, my cumulative relative frequencies. Okay, so we can actually compute these things pretty quickly this way. Okay, so this is our frequency table. So it's pretty ugly to look at right now. Let's do one more thing. Let's make this a little bit prettier. I want to do a few things. First of all, this header row, I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to center it. So I click the B up here to make it bold. These little lines tell me how do I align the text. I'm going to align it in the center. And I'm going to give a little background color to these cells to make them stand out since they're a menu, just a light gray behind it, right? So that gives it a little bit of, it stands out a little bit from the rest. Let's, I think it might look nicer if the numbers themselves are all centered. So let's just go ahead and make everything centered. Okay. We also have way too many decimal places here. Let's change the amount of decimal places we have. So the way we do that is up here under Format in our menus. Under Number, we can decide how many decimal places we want. Let's go ahead and do 3, which doesn't show up here. There's an option for 2 decimal places for 1. Let's do 3, and so I'm going to have to do a custom number. And so all I do is type 0.000 to tell it I want 3 decimal places. And notice it's corrected all of these now to just 3 decimal places. Here's another interesting thing. Let's see if this actually, oh no, wait, that won't work now. Sorry, I misspoke. I shouldn't have said that. Okay, so this looks a lot nicer to me now. This is a lot easier to read. You can decide if being centered is really nicer or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We can do other things if we wanted to, like giving the cells a little more difference. I can fill in the borders. So this here is saying fill in all the borders, or maybe I just want to fill in the borders around it, right, to make a little table. Maybe I should have included this stuff below. Let me get a nice little table going on, okay? So I think, let's see, I should have, let's undo everything and just do the outside. All right, I think that looks a little bit better. Maybe I'll gray this bottom as well as the classes. Okay, so there's our frequency table. This is a grouped frequency table, right? So now I have these classes collecting data together instead of just taking each individual data value. And most data that's sizable, this is what you do, right? If we were doing a study on the heights of students in Seattle Central College, I can't even list every height, right? Somebody might be exactly 5 foot and somebody else is 5 foot and 2/3 of an inch and somebody else is 5 foot and 1/4 an inch. Right? It might just make sense to list all the students who are between 5 foot and 5 foot and a half an inch, and then from 5 foot and a half an inch to 5'1" and so forth, creating these little ranges that make more sense instead of individual values. A couple things before we go. First of all, when you guys do assignments with these spreadsheets, one thing you'll have to remember to do is share it with me. So the way I like to share things is, let me do this again. I'm clicking on this share button, and you can individually add email addresses, but I prefer to do this. I go to advanced. Right now, this is private, only I can access this file. I like to either, I'll do anyone with the link. This means if you send me the link, I can open it, okay? I won't be able to change it, just like you won't be able to edit my spreadsheets that I share with you, but you can look at them. You can also copy them and paste them into your own spreadsheet so that if you wanted to play with the same data, you can open it up in a new file that you do have access to editing it, right? I could change that. I could give you the power to edit it, but I'm going to just leave it as view. And then I save those settings. Notice before there was a lock, now it's got a picture of a person with a link, meaning anyone with the link can open this data up. Let's do one more thing and then we'll finish this one. I'm gonna copy this by selecting all the data and pressing Command C. I'm on a Mac. If you're on a Windows or Linux or something else, anything, whatever your normal copy command is should work. And I'm gonna open up a new document in Google. So I use Google Docs here. And here's something that's really nice about this. If I hit now, remember I copied it, if I hit Command V, I get this paste table option, and I can either link it or unlink it. I'm gonna keep it linked. And that table that I just copied shows up in my document so that if I was sort of presenting a lesson on frequency, I can build this frequency table and put it into a nice document. And if I am dealing with that document later and realize I want to change this table, I can open up the source, go back and edit it, and those edits will appear here, right? So let's just do one of those. For instance, so I open the source. Let's say I decided, oh, I should make the classes bold. Let's make this text bold. So I press B, make that all bold. Now I go back to my document. It has this option to update. And now all that text is bold. And so if you make a mistake, it's very easy to update. And so this might be nice if you're typing something or sending something to me that you can copy and paste these things in, and I can see exactly what you're talking about. Okay, that is it for now. Thanks.